Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch and Learn. It's so nice to see everyone who is joining with us today. I love when our next speaker speaks. It is hard to be both a rabbi's rabbi and a congregant's rabbi, and Rabbi Stephen Moss is really both. As a rabbi to fellow rabbis, he's a beloved resource and friend and source of wisdom, and to congregants as well. And as I've always said, we're lucky in South Florida because a lot of rabbis retire here, and so they become part of the congregation. But Rabbi Moss, it is rare that a rabbi becomes part of the congregation as you have, as a resource in teaching, as a confidant for us as clergy, and now as part of our Wise Aging initiative. You're just so beloved here, and I'm so happy that you'll be teaching with us for the rest of the month. And so appreciate it. Rabbi Dr. Stephen Moss is Rabbi Emeritus of B'nai Israel in Oakdale, Long Island. He is now chaplain to the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department and recipient of numerous awards, including Chaplain of the Year and Rabbi of the Year from the New York Board of Rabbis, as well as recognition from the Police Department, the County Executive's Office, and the District Attorney's Office. He recently published God is With Me, I Have No Fear, and a poetical journey through Sefirat, HaOmer. He's also written numerous articles for Sacred Aging, and he's a member of Beth El, and hopefully will add to his bio and just a loving part of the synagogue at multiple levels. And it's a pleasure to have him. This topic of visiting the sick and comforting the bereaved will be an amazing topic to learn with you for the rest of the month. So Rabbi Moss, I'll hand things over to you and welcome and thank you. And we're going to have you unmute. And while you unmute, I want to thank Amanda, our amazing producer, who will be with us and monitoring the chat and the participants. Rabbi Moss.
Rabbi, I thank you for your lovely words and for your friendship. And it's nice to see all of you. By the way, I am not in South Florida right now. The beautiful thing about Zoom is you could be anywhere. So actually, I'm about 3,000 miles away in California, outside of Los Angeles for this Zoom and the next one next week, same time, as well as the last week. I'll be back. We do have a home still on Long Island, and for the last session, be there. So this is kind of weird, but we have to say thank God for this miracle that we're able to share this way. So therefore, I say that this is a lunch and learn for all of you. If you want to eat while I'm speaking, you can. You can actually, obviously, stop your video and you could eat, and I wouldn't even know it. And for me, this is a breakfast and learn, I guess, except I'm not going to be eating, but rather sharing with you. And so, if I can, first let me give a little bit more of my background, which as you will hear, especially in today's session, that I'll be sharing with you. For 30 years, I was a chaplain at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in Manhattan. Some of you might be familiar with that incredible institution, medical institution, either personally or through family members or friends. And I began there in 1970 as a rabbinical student. And I continued there for 30 years until the year 2000. And some of the experiences that I'm going to be sharing with you today come from my experiences there. The session today is going to be on visiting the sick. What to say, how to care for those who are ill, whether they are at home or in a hospital or in a hospice setting or in a nursing home. What direction does our Jewish tradition teach us, and what can we learn from life itself? Next week is going to be on the Shiva call and visiting the house of Shiva, what to say, what to do. And then the last session, I would hope that all of you will be sticking around for that one. And that is, I think, the most important one of all. And it's going to be dealing with our own mortality in order to appreciate the living of life every single day, which is an important teaching. In addition to all of my professional experiences over the years at Sloan Kettering and other hospitals and hospices and programs that I was involved in and still am involved in certain ways, what I bring to you also is my studies in a very interesting text, actually was printed in 1626 in Mantua, Italy, and it was written by Rabbi Aharon Berechia. It is entitled Mavia Bo, which is a fascinating book which gives not only the rituals, prayers, ceremonies to be brought into the room of a person who is ill, to care for those who are dying, as well as caring for the dead, because it's written for Chevra Kadisha organizations, that is holy brotherhoods that care for the sick, the dying, and the dead. But also really it brings a Kabbalistic or Jewish mystic understanding and underpinning to all of these mitzvot that we perform. I entitled this I'm going to bring up my share screen now, so hold on everybody. And hopefully I'll be successful with this. Let's see. Hold on a second. I'm going to unstop that. I'm going to do something first. I'm going to bring it to a slideshow. There we go. Okay, let's see. Can everyone see that? Just nod your heads, kind of. I felt good, thanks. Okay, good. I'm going to make this smaller. Okay. Temple Beth El, Boca Raton. Notice my topic here is entitled Gemilut Chasadim, Deeds of Loving Kindness. Many of you might be familiar with these words, Gemilut Chasadim, usually translated as deeds of loving kindness. But as Rabbi Aharon Berechia points out in the opening chapter of his book, actually, for those of you familiar with Hebrew, when you have an im, a yud, final mem ending to a word, it actually is the plural. So therefore, it is deeds of loving kindnesses. And then Rabbi Berechia, being that he is a Kabbalist, relates this to the energy levels in the universe, in our lives, called Sefirat. And actually, when we perform deeds of loving kindness, of visiting the sick, of caring for people who are not well on any level, be it physical or emotional or spiritual, as well as when we care for those who are dying, as well as deal with those who have passed away, what we are doing is that we are activating within the divine system of life and existence two of the energy levels. One is called chesed, and the other is called malchut. Chesed is kindness and love, and malchut is that idea of bringing God and the Shekhinah, God's presence, into our lives. So today, and this was the second session, and she left already, but I do thank Rabbi Jessica for opening this last week. I don't know how many of you attended last week, but I'm quite sure it was very helpful and instructive in setting the groundwork for the presentation. Today, I'm going to talk about being a third, that is, a listening ear, finding the person within the person, accepting the other feelings of others and just listening and being there for others. For each one of these lessons, I'm going to share with you experiences that I have had as a chaplain at Sloan Kettering Cancer Center for the most part. I realize, of course, that I'm going to share with you very dramatic experiences, very moving experiences personally, professionally, that I had, but I can remember them even though they were almost 50 years ago. And yet, I hope, I know, and I will help you with this. In the next section, you'll see that you'll be able to walk away from this and apply them to your lives. What does it mean to be a third listening ear? This is very, very important when you are dealing with and trying to help people who are ill, or even going to visit a doctor in an office. There was a man whose name was Charlie. I walked into Charlie's room on my hospital rounds at the hospital, and Charlie was sitting at the edge of his bed, hysterically crying. I walked over to him, sat next to him, and put my arm around him. Going back, certainly the 1970s were very different than they are today. Today, a chaplain, a rabbi visiting in the hospital cannot just walk over to someone and put his or her arm around that patient or hold their hand without asking permission. The world is very different, to say the least. I'm sure you all understand what I'm trying to say. But anyway, I sat down next to Charlie and I said to him, "What's happening? Why are you so upset as you are?" After introducing myself. Charlie said to me that his surgeon had just come into the room, said to him, "Charlie, I'm going to send you home for 2 weeks." Charlie lived in Kentucky. "And I'm going to send you home and give you time to speak with your wife, your family, to make a decision whether you want to have the surgery that I'm offering to you," which would have been very, very, very drastic surgery. Charlie was 45 years old, and they wanted to do both an ileostomy and a colostomy in the operation, which means he would no longer go to the bathroom in a normal fashion for the rest of his life. And Charlie said, so I said, "Well, why are you crying in this way?" Charlie said, "Well, before I could even ask this doctor a question, he ran out of the room." Why was Charlie most upset about this? Although obviously this kind of decision would be overwhelming and probably most of us would be crying as well, is because Charlie was a lawyer. And as a lawyer, he was used to doing what? Asking questions, getting to the bottom of a situation in order to obtain the information, in this case, for himself. And so as Charlie was relating all of this to me, the surgeon flew back in, said, "Oh, Charlie, I forgot to tell you, if you have the operation, you'll be freed of cancer." The two of us went like that. Our mouths were open, and before either of us could ask, "Well, doctor, what do you mean by that?" We looked, he was gone. Charlie looked at me and said, "What did he say?" And I confirmed what we both had heard. Charlie did have the operation. For the next 3 years, every single time Charlie came back into the hospital for whatever treatments or other operations, unfortunately, etc., is that if he was going to be meeting with a physician, and at that time I was in the hospital 5 days a week full time as a chaplain, he asked me to be with him because he understood a third listening ear is vital. Family members are important if there's no one else, but you really need someone other than the patient to be there to listen, to hear. Charlie passed away, and I was asked by the family they flew me to Kentucky and actually flying me to Kentucky, of course, but they asked me to officiate at Charlie's funeral. When I visited them during Shiva, they said to me, the reason why Charlie became so involved, wanted me so very, very much to be with him over this period of time, and the relationship we developed. I'll never forget the last time I saw Charlie, is that we embraced each other, expressed how much we cared for each other, how much we loved each other, because I had been there for him and with him by being a listening ear. By the way, until the day he died, he was totally uninvolved in a Jewish community in Kentucky. He and his family were not members of a synagogue. His children were never bar mitzvah. And he kept on saying to me, he never would have called on a rabbi in his entire life, but I was there at the right moment to be that third ear. Finding the person within the person. I remember to this very day, going back to almost 1970, I was 23 years old, by the way, at that time. I walked into this man's room, and it was a two-bedroom, and I walked into the room, and this man had one of the most, I'll have to use this word, ugly things I've ever seen on a person's face. It was a terrible, terrible melanoma covering half his face, crusted, bloody, just ugly. And so it is that when I walked into the room, fortunately at this moment he was sleeping, I looked at this and I almost wanted to get sick. I immediately walked out of the room as quickly as possible and stood in the hallway, literally panting. I thought my heart was going to jump out of my chest. I took some deep breaths, calmed myself down, and I said to myself, Steve, is that you have to go back in that room and you have to train yourself and focus yourself not on this man's face, but on the person within that face, on the neshama, on the soul within that face, the person within. So I took a couple of really deep breaths and I walked into the room. This gentleman had awakened. I sat down next to him, put my hand on his, and began to talk to him, focusing obviously not on his face, but the person within. Finding the person within is very, very important. One of the flaws that I end up specializing in during my 30 years at Sloan Kettering was head and neck surgery. That's the one I ended up getting involved in, the one in which obviously in those days, especially the drastic head and neck surgeries that they did for facial or throat cancers, in which half of people's faces had been cut away from operations, is that I was able to do that because guess what? I need to find that person within, and when I did, our two souls, that patient's and mine, connected, and it meant something to that person, but obviously also meant something to me. Accepting the feelings of others and just listening. This is a very important lesson for everyone when visiting those who are ill, severely ill, and especially those who are dying. I'm assuming that all of us on the Zoom room have experienced loved ones who have been very ill and have been either dying or actually have died. And at times when we're with a loved one, it's especially hard, but even with a friend, or not even necessarily a close friend, and the person knows that how ill they are, and they say to you, as they said to me, I need to talk about my funeral. I need to talk about what's going to happen then and afterward. I need to make the arrangements, or simply just talk about what it is that their fears, their concerns about dying. And so many people avoid that question. And unfortunately, and I have to use that word, unfortunately, they say, oh, let's not talk about it now. It's too difficult. Or a person's lying in a hospital bed and they are dying. The visitor knows it, the patient knows it, and the visitor says to that question or that statement by the patient, oh, you're not going to die. Don't even think about it. It's ridiculous. Well, that person in that bed needs to overcome one of the most important things that a person going through at this time is experiencing, and that is what? The experience and the feeling of what? Being alone. They need to hear someone say, well, okay, this is not an easy discussion, but let's talk about it. Go ahead. I'm here for you. And to hold their hand and to be with them. One of the other flaws that I specialized in during those years was pediatrics. And there was a boy, his name was Douglas. Douglas was 9 years old and he had a brain tumor. And when I first walked into his room, there was Douglas. He was in his wheelchair, slumped over, totally unreactive to the environment around him. But as I walked into the room, I looked to my right, and there was his mother curled up in a ball on the floor in the corner of the room. Of course, I walked in, I addressed her first, I introduced myself to her, and I said, spoke to her for a moment or two, trying to communicate with her. She didn't even look up at me at all. She said to me nothing. But I noticed her son, Douglas, in the wheelchair. So in the first meeting that I had with this family, I walked over to Douglas, sat down next to his bed, put my hand on his, and simply talked to him. He never opened his eyes, never related back to me, but of course I believed that he could hear me. I talked to him about all kinds of things, even baseball, anything at all, just so they could hear a human voice, another voice. And the important thing is, as you've noticed already, in all the examples I've given to you, is the holding of a hand, the embrace, how important that is, especially in situations like these. Before I left, I gave Douglas a kiss on his forehead, told him how much I cared for him, and I said, said a very brief prayer, basically saying, well, God bless, watch over you, and I'll be back later this week. At that time, I was visiting 5 days a week at the hospital. So as I remember, I probably visited Douglas at least 3 out of the 5 days of the week because I had other responsibilities and floors to visit in the hospital. A couple of weeks went by, and again, every single day, the same thing. The mother didn't look at me. and Douglas was in that same very, very sad condition. I came onto the floor one day, and Douglas's room was another patient. I went over to the nurse's station, and they let me know and gave me an envelope from Douglas's mother that she had left upon discharge. I opened the note up, and it said, "Rabbi Moss, please call me." Turned out to be that this family also lived on Long Island. People came from all over the world to Sloan Kettering because of its incredible facilities and obviously ways of dealing with cancer, even in these early years in the 1970s and 60s, probably. Anyway, I called Douglas's mother up and she said, "Hi, this is me." And I said, "You asked that I call you." And she said, "Yes, Rabbi, I have a favor to ask of you." And I said, "Sure, whatever I can do for you." And she said to me, "When Douglas dies, I would like you to be the rabbi to officiate at his funeral." I said to her, "Certainly I will be there for you and I will be there for him. But I'm a little surprised," I said. "After all, you and we didn't even talk with each other." And she said, "Rabbi, that's why I want you at Douglas's service. From the moment that you walked into the room and you introduced yourself to me, I was so angry at God, angry at you as representing God to me, and you did not invade my space. You allowed me to be angry. You allowed me you simply let me be and respected me for what I was going through during this terrible time with my son, Douglas. I would like you to be there for us." And I was. The last one here, as you can see, just be there for another person. As I mentioned at the very beginning, when I started at Sloan Kettering in 1970, I was 23 years old. I received a call to go into this young man's room. He was 19 years old. His name was Gary, and he was, dying of leukemia. I walked into his room. His family was surrounding his bed, and Gary was lying there with an oxygen mask on, eyes closed. I introduced myself as I walked in. Actually, a nurse had asked me to visit with the family and to visit Gary. I walked into the room. Again, I went over to Gary's bed, introduced myself to him, took his hand, and he opened his eyes. The first words out of his mouth were, "Rabbi, where is the justice in what's happening to me?" 19 years old, he knew he was dying. The first words that came out of my mouth, and by the way, Kubler-Ross's book, Death and Dying, had not even been written yet or published yet. I had not taken any courses in Hebrew Union College. I went to the same school that Rabbi Levin, Rabbi Jessica went to. The first words out of my mouth were, I'd be a fool to give you an answer." A few seconds later, he closed his eyes and went back to sleep. At that time in 1970, Hebrew Union College was on West 68th Street. Sloan Kettering was on East 68th Street. So a few moments later, the family really wasn't in the mood to talk at all about any of the things going on with Gary and the situation, the horrible situation. But I said to the family, I'll be back the next day before going to class. Well, I went back the next day. I was living on Long Island and traveled in to the city. For those of you who know New York. I went up to the room, Douglas's room, and I took Douglas's hand, and I never left that room for the next 8 hours. And Douglas, for the next 8 hours, did not even let go of my hand until he took his final breath and died. The family asked me to officiate at Gary's funeral. And during Shiva, again, I visited, of course, and I said to Gary's parents, why did Gary want me to hold his hand during those 8 hours, the last 8 hours of his life? And they said to me, because of the answer that you gave him. My answer, which some people might say, I'd be a fool to give you an answer, is no answer at all. I don't know if anyone really does know an answer to Gary's question that question, where is the justice in what's happening to me? Because obviously there is no justice, to use that word. But by my answer and my willingness to hold his hand and stay with him until that last breath, showed him that, guess what? He will not be left alone, not by the family and loved ones who surrounded him, but also he will not be abandoned by his Jewish community. And I also believe that, well, understandably, we all represent God to other people when we bring God into our lives and to the situations that we're in. But also I understand that as a rabbi, to some people, like with Douglas's mother, for better or for worse, kind of represent God to them in a way, the tradition and God and the divine and all the teachings that we know of and the Torah and the Bible, is I was also basically, by my being there, saying to him, just like I will not abandon him and let him die alone, neither will God. So I shared these stories, and I understand that they're a little dramatic, to say the least, but obviously dramatic stories teach the lessons. Over my 30 years at the hospital, I saw thousands of patients, to say the least. But these are 4 very important lessons to understand how we can be most effective in being there for others and fulfilling the mitzvah of Gemilut Chasadim, and that is deeds of loving kindnesses, the kindness in the divine chesed and love, and also bringing it right down to malchut into our lives. To be there for others as a listening ear, family members and friends. No one should go to a doctor, make an appointment with a doctor, or in a hospital setting when the doctor is in the heart. That's not easy in hospitals, because if any of you have been a patient in the hospital, when do doctors show up? At 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. Amazingly so, they're always there and say, okay, Mrs. So-and-so, can you wake up? I'm Dr. So-and-so. I'm here to give you your diagnosis. Well, that from the test you had yesterday. Well, you were tight asleep. He's waking you up. It's not good to make appointments to make sure that obviously the person is not hearing this alone, because people cannot take this information in. For those of you who've been patients at all, you know exactly what I mean. The other is to be a person with a person. What is that beautiful Barbra Streisand song, right? About everyone needs somebody. People who need people are the luckiest people in the world. Well, guess what? We always need other people. We need community, but especially at times of illness. Although, as you'll see as I go through the next part of my presentation, I'm going to say this morning for you, this afternoon, your afternoon, is that there are times when, of course, a person needs to be by themselves and should be, and that has to be respected. The other part, of course, is just to listen and respect other people's feelings, and never to put another person's feelings down. If they have fears, if they have concerns, whatever they are, to be a listener. And sometimes you don't have to say anything at all, just to sit and listen. And then the final one, of course, is just to be there with love and care. Okay, I was able to find this presentation now on a website entitled My Jewish Learning, okay? Okay, I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because there's quite a few of them. I want to be mindful of time and also give any of you the opportunity to share as well or ask any questions. But it's nice to see all of you today, and I'm assuming that there are those who are also streaming. Okay, number one, upon discovering that someone who is ill, send a brief card or a note, okay? Rather than allowing a silence to isolate the sick, if you cannot visit quickly, send a note. Obviously, getting in touch with someone, letting them know that you care, that someone cares, is so very, very important. Many studies have been done, and many studies have proven that if someone knows that others care about him or her, then that allows the person, first of all, someone likes me, someone cares about me. I'm quite sure that some of you have experienced this or heard others experience this. You know something, I was really sick. For matter of fact, I was in that cardiac unit. I almost died. Boy, I found out who my real friends are, right? Okay, it's amazing. Of course, there's some people who actually have a book and count and keep score. Who showed up, how many times, when. That's not healthy, okay? We don't want to go into the negative side either. But the fact is, having people care by a note, by a card, by a phone call, it doesn't necessarily have to be an actual visit. Number two, I like this one. I'm sure I know the rabbis of Temple Beth El like this one. Alert the sick person's rabbi. If you know someone is ill, if they're, let's say, Temple Beth El, obviously, if they're involved in the temple, let the rabbis know. You are not being governed by HIPAA. I am, meaning if I visit someone in a hospital, if I make rounds as a chaplain, if I'm going to contact any rabbi and let them know that such and such a person is in the hospital, I have to first ask that person's permission. You, as a non-professional person, would not have to do that. 3, plan to visit the sick. The physical presence of caring people can banish loneliness and provide tangible evidence of a concerned community. Obviously, that statement is obvious. Okay, continuing. 4, don't plan on a long visit. I have had members of my synagogue back on Long Island. They come into a hospital room and they're there for the duration. I mean, even when the hospital at night says, okay, no more visitors, they don't want even to get up. They make this a second home. That is not appropriate. Aside from the fact that there's a schedule in the hospital, things are going to be done to the patient or with the patient. On the other hand, people need to do what? When you're in a hospital, whether you've had surgery or chemotherapy, whatever it is, people need time to do what? To rest. And many people who are patients, and for those of you who have been patients over the years, know what I'm talking about. Many people who are patients really feel very uncomfortable by saying, hey, Joanne, I'm tired. Thank you for visiting. Come back another time. Very few people are comfortable throwing someone out of the room, as in quotes. It's not up to the patient to ask you to leave. It's up to you to make sure you know when to leave. A Temple member, I remember years ago at a cardiac hospital on Long Island, the wife posted herself as the guard outside her husband's room. She was the guardian of the times, and she certainly did it very, very well. Number 5, schedule your visit appropriately. The Talmud counsels not to visit the sick early in the morning or late at night. Why not in the morning? First of all, you want to make sure you know at a hospital what the hours are of visiting. Certain hospitals will not, obviously I'm not talking about COVID situations and all of the regulations regarding that. That was extraordinary. But during normal times, whatever those are going to be in the future or currently, is that most hospitals have visiting hours. They're not even going to let you in. But if there are no visiting hours, or it's a nursing home or assisted living facility, the fact is things happen in the morning. First of all, aside from the doctors and nurses making their rounds and caring for the patient, the fact is people are just getting up. There's bathroom concerns that they have to take care of, things like that. And obviously late at night, there is a time to say, well, it's been great visiting you, Suzanne. It's time for me to go home. I wish you well. Before visiting the patient, number 6, phone ahead and let them know. Check it out. Call up and say, oh, Sylvia, hi. How are things today? I'm thinking of visiting. Is that okay? This was, as you can imagine, for me as a chaplain, was a very challenging part of learning to be a chaplain. And that is what? Respecting people's what? Their space. A patient has the right to throw you out of their room. You might have even traveled 45 minutes to get there. Let's say, for instance, a friend of yours is in the Cleveland Clinic down there on 75, almost by Pembroke Pines. And so you got in the car, you schlepped all the way down there, okay? There was even traffic. Oh, there's only traffic. Okay, not 75 so much. 95 was a wreck. Sawgrass was a wreck. You get down there, you've been traveling 45 minutes, maybe even worse, for an hour. You go into the room, and lo and behold, all of a sudden, and you walk into the room, and so says to you, I'm not really feeling well today. Thanks, please leave. I'm not well today. And you walk out, and you're so upset, and you slept all that way. That's not the idea. You have to respect the space. And therefore, to call in advance. It could also be, however, you do call, and the patient says, sure, this will be a great day. And you slept down there, and unfortunately, something has happened in between. For those of you who are patients, you know what I'm talking about. Stuff happens, right? In hospitals, every single moment. One moment could be great, and then the next moment, it could be a disaster. Stuff happens in a bed. I'm not going to go into the details, as you all can understand and imagine. So you want to respect the person. I certainly will never forget walking into a patient's room at the hospital, introduced myself, and he said to me, Rabbi, I'm glad you're visiting. Thank you for visiting, but I don't really need you. I'm a Republican and an atheist, and I don't need a rabbi. I'm not sure what exactly his words meant, but I said, no problem at all. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, I do wish you well. By the way, as I was at that time visiting regularly on the floor, every time I walked by this man's room, who threw me out of the room, basically, and the door was open, I waved and kind of indicated a hi. And I'll never forget it. Maybe during the second, maybe the third week that he was in the hospital, I looked by the room, the door was open, I waved, and guess what? He had his finger like this, and he was calling me into his room. On that day, he wanted to talk to me. The key is to what? To be there for others, but remember, the others are going to set the time, the place, and the conversation. Prepare for a visit carefully and thoughtfully. Most of these things I'm sure you know. Don't wear perfume or aftershave lotion, okay? Many patients are very sensitive to this. Most people are not really doing too much with this anymore. Now, this one down here is interesting. I thought this is great. Don't bring bad news, okay? You don't want to be there and say, oh, did you hear that Irving passed away yesterday? I mean, that's not why you're visiting. You're visiting to show your love and concern for the person in the bed. Let that person define the discussion. Now, select 1 or 2 topics for discussion. Prepare yourself in this way can help you really sit and talk. In other words, come up with something. Let's say, for instance, it's this time of the year, spring, summer, and it's baseball season. And you know a little bit about baseball. So you want to talk about, I don't know, the Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm in Los Angeles now, or the Marlins, whomever. And you know the person likes to talk about sports, to try to bring discussions into the room, but make them appropriate. This last one here, bring a patient a smaller practical gift. Be aware of things that might be the next one here. Let's see. Yeah. And that is be aware of things going on in the room. I walked into this patient's room and I introduced myself, but as I did that, I take everything in the room. I scan the room. And I noticed that she had flowers that had been brought by somebody else on the bedstand, but they were not in water. So I said to her, oh, would you like me to get water, a vase with water for your flowers? And she said to me, what? A rabbi does that? I said, sure, why not? Let me do this for you. Well, that was very much appreciated, number one, unexpected, number two, but it opened the door for us to establish a very loving and caring relationship during the time that this patient was in the hospital. Before entering the patient's room, make sure you knock. Just don't walk in. The patient could be undressed, the patient could be on a commode. There's a lot of stuff that can be going on. You want to knock and say, hi, this is so-and-so, this is Steve. Can I come and, I called before, I'm here now, can I come and visit? And again, they might say to you, no, please, I'm just waiting in the hall for a while, okay? Or it might be obviously that a nurse is taking care of so-and-so. This person had surgery, they're changing the dressing, the wounds, the wounds for the dressing for the wounds, and therefore you would They would say, no, please wait in the hall. They define the time, place, the communication, the setting. If there are, number 9, if there are many already visiting in the afternoon or early evening, obviously, and some hospitals, as you might be aware, define how many people could actually be visiting at one time. But again, you want to be sensitive to all of these things. Number 10, when visiting, help with concrete tasks, again, similar to the one about the flowers just now, you can do certain things. And to be, again, aware on so many levels, especially if you're visiting a friend or a community member who is in a nursing home, a skilled nursing facility. This person might have had a stroke or might have Parkinson's or some kind of a physical disability that makes eating a challenge. So you're sitting there visiting, everything is good, everything's quiet, things are going well in the visit, you feel good about it. They seem to look and seem to feel good about it. And then the nurse comes in, or not, probably not a nurse, but an aide comes in and delivers the tray with the food. And all of a sudden you have a sense, maybe so-and-so is going to have difficulty eating by herself. And you might then say, well, I'm going to pick on, I know I've picked on this name already, so I'll use it again. Sylvia, would you like me to help you with your meal? And Sylvia might feel comfortable enough with you to say, yeah, that'd be great. Could you? Or maybe just nod, or maybe just blink eyes. It might be that you might be able to hold that person's hand, if they have Parkinson's, to hold it steady. You simply, it means that you are there at the right time to do what? To perform a mitzvah. This is what a mitzvah is all about. This is why the acts of Gemilut Chasadim are considered to be some of the greatest mitzvot that one can do for another. So number 11, again, being there for a meal. Continuing. Number 12, don't feel that you have nothing to talk about. There is always something to talk about. However, please understand, sometimes you don't have to say anything at all. Many of us have a lot of problems with silence, like now. You might have just said, okay, Rabbi, I got the idea. Keep on going, will you? The fact is that silence, as another song said, silence is golden. Because it simply means that you're not afraid to be there, just be there. Obviously, be alert of objects in the room. This one I like. Don't criticize the hospital, the doctors, the food, the medical procedures. Again, you're just listening. Even if you have opinions, your friend is telling you about the way the doctors have treated her and how terrible it is. Just listen and say, wow, I'm sorry you're going through all of this. Don't all of a sudden either try to take the doctor's side with her and become her advocate, or on the opposite, try to defend the doctors to show her another way. That is not your role. Unless you're a family member, and that's a whole nother story, possibly. Don't evaluate medical procedures. The patient, the person you're visiting tells you what they've gone through, and you say, well, something, such and such a hospital, JFK does it much better, okay? That's not your role. You are there to be supportive and represent, number one, yourself and a loving community. And yes, guess what? You too represents God's presence in that room, because when you show love to others, that is what it's all about. But on the other hand, as the last one on this page says, you're not there to defend God. As you notice what I did with Gary, I simply said I'd be a fool to give you an answer. I didn't take God's side one way or the other. The next vignette I will share with you is, again, an extreme one. I was walking down the pediatrics floor hallway. Everyone knew me, and I was walking down the hallway, and this mother of one of the patients saw me, and she came running up to me, and all of a sudden started hitting me, pounding me with a fist on her chest, screaming, Rabbi, Rabbi, I hate you and I hate God. The two of us fell down on the floor together. I held her to keep her safe, and she started crying. I let her cry, and then she looked at me and she said to me, she collected herself, and she said to me, Rabbi, I'm sorry, I didn't mean what I said. I said to her I was silent for a few moments just to allow her to take a couple of breaths to calm the situation down. And then I said to her, you did mean it, and that's okay. Again, number 13, don't be afraid to sit in silence. Number 14, again, listening. Besides demonstrating our involvement by offering our physical presence, we can do so by allowing the sick person to speak of their concerns. In fact, this is the main service we can offer. If people who are sick want to speak about their illness or about something else, then listen. All of us have a need to be heard, most of all when we feel strained or ill. Number 15, offer your hand. Again, for me as a professional, that's a little bit more difficult. But obviously, if you're visiting a loved one, a family member, or even someone from the community, well, a community is another story, but certainly a family member or friends, touching, holding a hand, embracing someone, allowing someone to know that you care. We as human beings need to be held, need to be touched. There is no more immediate way to demonstrate that you will not abandon a person to illness than by reaching out and placing your hand on the patient's shoulder, or by taking the person's hand in your own. The calm love and stability that touch provides is without equal. I don't know what it was with Douglas, that's that 9-year-old boy, that I'll use this word in quotation marks, impressed the mother so much about my visits, but I'm quite sure that one of them was, before I left, I gave him a very loving kiss on the forehead. These are the ways in which, by reaching out to others, by touching someone, we show them true love. Number 16, offer to pray with a patient. This really would call for a whole nother course of praying for others and dealing with prayer for those who are ill. But certainly if you felt so inclined, you could say, obviously, God bless you, Sylvia. I hope that you're well. On the other hand, as the next one, prayer can be informal, or on the next page you'll see also, is that to let the person know as you're walking out, well, Sylvia, I'm going to let Rabbi Levin know that you're here in the hospital, and I'm going to mention your name on Friday night when we do the prayer for the Misha Beirach, the prayer for healing, okay? And studies have shown that by your saying that to someone, it makes a world of difference and actually contributes to their recovery. Because by knowing a community cares and loves that person, it creates a certain positive energy within inside of them and affects their hormones, their immunology, their ability to fight their illness. Again, as this point is out, prayer can be informal. The simple wish of a refuah shalema, God be with you, can bring a level of comfort that ordinary conversation cannot. Jewish tradition offers a brief prayer, linking the experience of the individual to the broader community. May God show compassion to you, together with all the other sick of the people of Israel. But again, it could simply be, well, God bless, I'll see you. By the way, some of you might know this already. The words we say when we leave someone, anyone, goodbye, is actually sort of like an acronym of goodbye, God be with you. You're saying it anyway, so why not say it? In terms of Jewish holidays, obviously, if it's appropriate, and again, you want to make sure that the person is able to eat certain foods while in a hospital or nursing home, can eat certain foods, you might want to connect them with that. The last one here, read a psalm together. And again, this would really be for another course in the prayers and the readings that would be very appropriate to use in a hospital setting. But one of the most powerful books of all within our tradition to be brought into the hospital room is, as said in this one, is the book of Psalms, the book of Tehillim. When people call me up or ask me, well, Rabbi, what can I say how can I pray for my loved one? What prayer can I say? You're at home and you're not visiting, but you're at home and you're very concerned about a loved one in your family or a friend. What can I say? What prayer? I will always recommend, notice it says here, Psalms 121, 23. Well, I wouldn't use 23. 23 for illness is not the best one, only because it's the famous one, the Lord is my shepherd, and that's really used for funerals. However, 121, 130, and one that's left off of here is Psalm 91. Psalm 91 is the psalm that I recommend for people to say for another person who is ill. Psalm 91 is called the anti-demonic psalm. It is a very powerful psalm in which we pray for God to protect us and thereby protect that person we're praying for from all harm and injury. Psalm 91. And the final part here, making Jewish gestures, and therefore number one here, attend a synagogue worship and offer the Misha Berach. Again, to let that person know. By the way, studies have also shown, and this gets into a whole nother discussion area of the power of prayer. Is prayer effective? Well, studies again have shown that if a person is told, you know something, on Friday at Temple Beth El on Friday, this coming Friday night, I'm going to mention your name when the rabbi goes around the room asking for names of the sick. Sylvia, I'm going to mention your name. That will help her in her recovery or dealing with what she has to deal with. But if to believe in the power of prayer, I do believe that if Sylvia was never told that a prayer was going to be said for her, and you say a prayer for her in your prayers at home or even at synagogue, I do believe that she will benefit from those words of prayer. Because when you think of someone else, that is in your mind, and thereby bring it into your heart, the image of that person is that a vibration of spiritual power is sent from you through God's presence to that other person. You can make a contribution to that in honor of that person. The giving of tzedakah is a very powerful ritual, giving of a contribution, no matter what the amount, on behalf of someone and saying, I'm donating whatever it is, $18, in honor of my friend Sylvia for her recovery. That will benefit her as well. I don't believe that Temple Beth El has a Bikur Cholam group. Does it have a group of people who visit people in the hospital aside from the rabbi? I'm going to ask Amanda maybe to open the microphones in a few moments. Maybe you'll answer that question. But if it doesn't, this might be something we might be able to establish there, and thereby it is community members visiting in the hospitals and also being trained to do so. And then the last one here, no, Mr. Sorry. The same thing, of course, would be for nursing homes and shut-ins. For those of you who have had loved ones in hospitals, nursing homes rather, or friends in long-term facilities. And of course, as you all know, in skilled living facilities, unfortunately, quite often, people unfortunately enter and they're there for the rest of their lives. My own mother, she passed away in 2005. She went into a nursing home and was there for 3 years, and she passed away from Parkinson's and dementia, and unfortunately never went home again. But the key is the community needs to stay involved with these people. How sad it is when people are abandoned by community and family. How often I visit people in some of these long-term facilities and no one visits them anymore. They've been there for years. Of course, this sometimes bespeaks of the relationships that they had when they were active and they were out there in the world. But be that as it may, no one should be left alone. And the beauty of community is making sure no one is left alone. There is always love and care. So, Amanda, are you still with me? If you could unmute everybody. Hopefully she's in. Um,
Everybody has the ability to unmute themselves.
Okay, so anyway, I hope that you all have the sense of what I've tried to get across today. And that is many of these things that I've shared with you are things that you have done. You know about them, but they always deserve repeating. But hopefully I've given you some more insight into how to care and show care for others. We as human beings yearn for love and care, especially during difficult times like this. So thank you all for listening this morning. And next week, I'll go to the next stage of being there for others who have suffered a loss in their families. But does anyone have any comments, questions during the last few moments that we have? Now that you're unmuted, does Temple Beth El have a group within the synagogue that visits the ill or in hospitals and nursing homes? Is anyone aware of that? Phil?
I'm not sure, actually.
Not sure. Well,
I did that in New Jersey. Before I came down here to live, and I liked it, but I found it very hard to do.
Oh yeah, it's not easy, which is why when in starting a group, there has to be an orientation, first of all, as to what to do and how to do. And then as people visit afterward to talk, have debriefings and to talk about the experiences that everyone has. But I'm hoping, of course, Phil, that when you did visit someone, that you saw how meaningful it was.
But definitely, I like doing it, but I just found it taxing on my own psyche, But the one thing that I think was probably the nicest thing that happened was it was before Hanukkah, and they were selling these little plastic menorahs on the street that had batteries in them. And I bought like 5 of them, and I gave them to people. And the one lady had a roommate, and she said, "I'm not Jewish. Can I have one too?" So of course, I gave her one. But it was people like little things like that. It was nice.
And certainly, and I'm looking around, I don't see, well, you all look very young, okay? You're a very young group here, I can tell. However, as I'm sure you all understand, that the older we get, people of a age like telling stories about their lives and what's happened. It's called reminiscing. It's a very, very important thing for people. And actually, my doctoral thesis was on reminiscing. And I listened to the Jewish stories of people in assisted living facilities and how important that is, because they can tell the stories of their lives, but also re-experiencing them at times as well. And there was this one woman, Florence, was 95 years old. And as she told the story of her Jewish life, she had talked about how special it was when her mother would light the Shabbat candles with the motions covering her eyes. And I said to Florence, did you do this with the candles and all when you got married with your family, with your children? And Florence immediately, her face changed and she said, "No, I didn't." And I said to her, "Why not?" And she said to me, "Because my mother never taught me." And so I said to Florence, "How would you like me to teach you how to light the candles in that way?" And her face all of a sudden took on a beauty and a glow. And she said, "Could you?" I said, "Yes." And so at a ceremony that we held over in that assisted living facility, is that Florence reenacted the ritual that her mother did. And afterward, I went to her and I said, "Florence, how do you feel today doing that?" And now remember, Florence is 95 years old. The experience she talked about was she was 5 years old with mom. And I said to her, "How did you feel about this today?" And she said to me, "For the first time in all these years, my mother came alive for me again. Thank you, Rabbi." We can do so very much for people when we connect with them, but we can't connect with others until we do what? We are willing to be there with them, whatever that means. So, everyone, I wish you a wonderful day. I hope not too much rain in Florida. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm here in Los Angeles, California. I love Florida, but I'm here for 2 weeks on vacation whatever I'm doing here, traveling around with friends. But the weather is gorgeous out here in Los Angeles, let me tell you. Come on out. No. Anyway, have a lovely day. I love you all. Shalom. And don't forget, come back next week, same time. And make sure you eat lunch, okay? Very important.
We do.